Hi, I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here with Hajjar Baban.
Hi, my name is Hajjar Baban. I'm an Afghan Kurdish poet, and I'm currently studying my MFA in poetry at the University of Virginia.
Right, nice. And something I just like to start off with is what is special to you about poetry and kind of what shifted you towards, I guess, studying it specifically, writing it, and as opposed to any other art form? And then also, as an addendum to that, what shifted you towards writing it instead of just reading it?
So I naturally started writing in different forms, and that was like my introduction to like eventually one day writing poems. I've I would keep like journals, dream journals, journals observing people when I was in high school. Um, so I think what's special about it though is that there's a lot less pressure in a very um, fictional or non-fictional way. I think that there's a lot of room to question myth and like knowledge and fact. And I think that's a lot of what I do in my own life. And so it naturally makes its way to poetry and also language for me. Um, I think your question about how did I work towards being a writer rather than a reader of poetry is so interesting because the writing is what comes natural to me. And I think that I had to learn how to be a reader and how to um, read with more care and attention, whether it's with my own work or others' work. Like I can write a poem and probably leave it for a very long time from like, and I could also have like so many books and poems of other poets that I can do the same with. Like I can like read a poem and not get it for a little while and come back to it a year later and find something in it. And so I think that it's a learning experience on both ends. I think definitely the writing comes really naturally, but learning how to engage with more care when reading is what I like work on more consciously.
Yeah, actually, it's odd because I think to an extent I'm somewhat the same. Like for me, writing is much easier just in the sense that writing the first draft of a poem or writing the rough sketch of a poem just whenever you get that feeling to write, and then I kind of just leave it alone. And then because to be honest, a big part of the editing phase is just being able to critically read your own poetry. And
Mhm.
for a long time that's very difficult for me. So I'll seek help from others to like because it gets to a point to me for me where when I read my own poetry, instead of actually reading what's on the page, all I can think about is what I was thinking of when I wrote it, and so I get
Yeah,
very tangled up in that kind of not really real part of it, and
mhm.
then so I kind of need to, and I've been getting better slowly at being able to look over my own work in that kind of way. So I definitely know what you're talking about when you say that.
Yeah, and um, like that feeling of what was I thinking when I wrote this, or how was I feeling when I wrote this, and thinking of like maybe that's different from how you feel when you're reading it, and that emotional disconnect, I think, like can get in the way of even being able to critique your own work, like before even reading it itself sometimes.
Yeah, and something I wanted to continue on that kind of thread is what themes, and I don't know if this has changed for you over time, but what themes do you generally explore in your poetry?
Yeah, I think the like the second half of your question of like I don't know if this has changed over time. I don't know why, but I'm fixating on that because I have been writing for a really long time and I don't know if it's that my my themes and my interests or obsessions changed. I just think that I feel more open to like understanding how they can work in a poem, or like giving myself the permission to write about certain things. So I think that I've like central themes in my work have to do with identity and belonging and culture and family and love and God and my father. But now I feel like ready to explore that on a like larger scale, and like a story or narrative that includes my mother and includes my sense of belonging within her culture and like my connection to her, and also things like girlhood, which is not necessarily something that I explicitly have written about in the past. So I think change is an interesting word, because those are still parts, like all of the things that I've mentioned that I'm like working on and writing about now, like those are still family, those are still culture, that's still belonging, but it's just like a wider range, I guess. So yes, to answer your question, but also I guess I'm just picking at that word change because I think it's more of a shift or an expansion, and less of my themes are different, because I think they're kind of the same. It's yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as long as the writing kind of comes from themselves, most people are probably similar to that, in that the way they change is more reflective of them kind of embodying more aspects of what they originally set out to write about. Because that initially, what you initially set out to write about probably is something deep inside you that is just going to be expressed either way.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not making too much sense of that, but
No, you're making a lot of sense. Sorry, I'm like all over the place, but um I feel like so if you have a new project or something that you're like, okay, this is in my mind and this is what I want to write about, I feel like always the first poem that like I would write in that case, like would be everything. So I think I kind of go backwards sometimes, would be like everything that I want to explore. And sometimes I try to get it into one poem. And so being on the opposite end of that, of having exhausted myself with a certain narrative or with a certain story, and being like, and being able to pull inspiration from that place of like emptiness, really. Like I've written the one poem that says everything. Then how do I move on? So I feel like it just made me think of that, like when I start a project and I like get the first poem out, I'm like, whoa, okay, this is like 7 poems actually.
yeah. And something else I wanted to ask about is I found that the answer varies, but there are some common threads. So I'm curious on what your response is to this. Where do you think are the most striking places where you get inspiration from?
It depends on what I'm writing. So I'm not very, I have been saying this a lot recently in interviews and just in conversations with poets. But I don't like to think of myself as an like imagistic writer. Like I don't pull from like just things that I like visually see. Um, and maybe I'm just not ever, I don't find myself in a beautiful enough place for that. But I think like how people interact and like engage with each other on the internet. Definitely, if I'm writing something that is like specific to a theme, or I like to research like Kurdish historians and like Kurdish men in history and stuff like that. And so like anything that they've said on the internet, sometimes I pull from that in more of like found poems and stuff like that. But I don't know, what do I pull inspiration from? I just have a lot of thoughts. Like I just have a lot. It's really just all in here. It's not like I don't really see things and I'm like, this would make a great image in a poem. Very rarely it happens. And like I really love visual art and music, and I'm like always in some way taking in a different type of art when I'm not writing. But yeah, I don't think that's where the inspiration, I think it's just my feelings. I have a lot of feelings. So maybe something will happen sometimes and I'm like, okay, like I should write about this. So I think, yeah, experience. Maybe that's the short answer.
Yeah. Something I just picked up on, and this is not necessarily a very strictly related question, but you said that you're always like consuming media and that kind of feels it as well. So you mentioned music. What kind of music?
A lot of things, a lot of everything, really. Maybe I I don't always like listening to instrumental music unless I'm in a mood. And I feel like everyone says this, I listen to everything but country, but it really is true. So yeah, I think primarily I like nostalgic soul sounds. um, yeah, but it's a range. It's a range, you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely the same when it comes to like kind of slow nostalgic sounding songs. And
Yeah.
it's odd because sometimes for me, just it's almost as if on command, some those songs, it was a while ago now, but I would listen to a song and then I immediately feel kind of like writing about something. So it really can work in a certain way, but there's always kind of a danger of I don't want to be too influenced by what I've been consuming into creating something that's not necessarily me.
Hmm. Do
So
you feel that way with music or with writing?
I think mostly I felt it with music because to a large extent, the writing that I've read, especially poetry, I feel that it's separate enough from me to the point where I'll maybe imitate like an idea or two, a broad idea or two, or like a specific form, but it usually doesn't feel like I'm taking too much of the poem itself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the more that I explore my own interests with what I want to write about, the more I see that like I don't find it in other people's work. Like that like it hits every single thing that I'm trying to accomplish. So yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. And one last thing, which is kind of a mental thing, actually, which is what happened or what was kind of the thought behind the point where you finally were like, yeah, I'm probably a poet, like a writer of poems. I don't know. There's something kind of mystical about the way that title is applied. So I want to ask about how you feel about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think some people don't like the title poet and are like, I'm a writer. As soon as I write something that isn't poetry, maybe I'll be one of those people. But I feel no, like, yeah, I have no qualms with the title. But as soon as I realize that I can't do, I don't want to say that I can't do anything else, but that I'm really not good at much else. So maybe when I was like 16, 17, when I got into undergrad on the basis of my poetry, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm a poet. And then I went to undergrad and I was like, oh, I'm really writing poems. Like I'm here and I'm writing new poems and I'm like doing this a lot. So I think it was definitely a gradual thing from like the first time that I wrote a poem and like performed it at a like slam competition, I don't know, in Detroit. And all the way to like now, I feel like it has been like a really gradual relationship with poetry and the idea of writing. But I think I really don't know what else I would be doing. And I can't do math, and simple concepts don't make sense in my head. So I think I'm good with feeling and writing.
All right. If you're ready, we go into the poem now.
Okay, is it okay if it's not published? This is going where?
Oh, this is going on to like a YouTube channel, and so
They
most of
can
it.
hear it. That's not technically publication, right?
I don't think so, but I don't know if
It's
you want to be
amazing.
safe.
Um, let's read this poem.
Okay.
Okay. You ready for it?
Yeah.
Recalling 9/11. Layla says, get over it. It was like a side quest of imperialism. Toba. But we have nothing now to be sorry for. My discomfort, the word invasion. Never will they sit down while men inspect their legs in the airport. Never whiteness passing them by. Never will they learn numbers in their language by counting Kalashnikovs in American-funded books. Terror is only something we taught to whiteness, right? Despite the threat of surveillance, I took Persian and first learned the word for beautiful in my language in college. We're the children of refugees and broke as shit. Leila knows. Nosha Janam, I think I could eat her for the simple realization. There are places we shouldn't have traveled. There's rooms where our shoulders can't meet their prestige. We walk alone at night. Monticello Road, California palms. She struggles with writing to survive, not to give hope. The MFA for us both reinvented our processing of loneliness. That's a death sentence in this country, Leila says. I last visited my brother in prison before learning that image, beings of Allah forcing their way into an end's fluorescence. I never understood before why nightly I couldn't rest without reciting against whom there is anger, nor of those who are misguided.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Do you have any closing words before we end the kind of video? Like any last words of advice, I guess?
I don't know. This wasn't in the interview question comments. I guess just do what you like.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.